Hello, I'm Caroline Jones. For 3.5 years, Dr Simon Palfreeman has been shuttling between Australia and Bulgaria, negotiating that country's complex and controversial justice system to try to help his 24-year-old son. Young Jock Palfreeman was convicted of unprovoked murder and jailed for 20 years after a melee in the streets of the capital city, Sofia. The final appeal court decision is due any day. Australian story producer Belinda Hawkins has been following the travails of the Palfreeman family and is writing a book on the subject. This is Dr Palfreeman's story.
A few days after Christmas 2007, Simon and I were having a family holiday, and it had been a very hectic year, so we were very much looking forward to having a relaxing time.
We were on a friend's boat in Pittwater, which is just north of Sydney Harbour.
It was about 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening, and we received a phone call. And it's that phone call you hope that you never receive.
Jock was in trouble. He was in prison in Bulgaria. I got some very early information to suggest that he had actually gone to help somebody, that in the melee someone had been killed. Really, it was, no, this can't be right. Why would anybody be so silly to have a knife? My initial feeling was just to go in there as a parent and get him out of there as quickly as possible. I really had no idea what to expect. I mean, it might sound absurd, but I knew very little about Bulgaria except weightlifters and poison-tipped umbrellas. I arrived in a snow-clad city. I couldn't even read the language because it was in Cyrillic. I was fearful of my own safety. And I think my overwhelming sense was I'm out of my depth.
Jock always did seem very different from his dad, a little bit more sort of out there in the world.
Simon has a very analytical brain. He's able to use this in his role as a pathologist, where he spends a lot of the day peering down a microscope.
Very early on I realised that Jock was unlikely to take on an academic career. He did finish the HSC. He then decided that he would go overseas.
Jock was 19, found himself in Bulgaria and just seemed to kind of settle in somehow. He obviously met some people quite quickly that he really liked. He just seemed to fall in love with a country that I would never have guessed.
He spent 6 to 8 months there. And then Jock returned to the UK.
Having been in Europe for quite a long time, his 2-year visa in the UK was beginning to come to an end. For some time he'd been thinking about the possibility of joining the British Army, which was something he was interested in doing anyway, but also would give him the opportunity to stay in this country for a little bit longer.
Once Jock had gone through all these hoops and had been selected, it was actually quite exciting.
Jock had been training in the army for about, approximately 4 weeks when the Christmas break kind of hit. I was really looking forward to seeing him. But at the last minute, he decided to go to Bulgaria to have Christmas.
When I first went to see Jock, I didn't know the procedures. People couldn't explain to me what I was supposed to do. And eventually, Jock got shown into a room. No, Jock. I just let Jock talk and he told me his story.
My friends and I were in the village, and I like the village, I like it, it's quiet.
I bought some tinsel for the tree, and I bought some Christmas decorations for the house.
And my friend convinced me that I should come to Sofia for the night. We all jumped in the car, and then I went back to get my ID. Next to the ID was a knife.
I don't know why, I just had a bad feeling about Sofia.
I couldn't find pepper spray a couple of days before, and I still feel scared to walk around Bulgaria, especially at night time. So I grabbed the knife and put it in my pocket. My friend bought that knife. They're legal in Bulgaria.
As I understand it, they went out for a night on the town. They could hear some noise coming from the subway.
A group of football fans started walking up the street, maybe 20, even more, maybe 25. And they were all singing and chanting. People were walking past them and they were pushing them. And I saw two men on the ground being beaten. One of them got up and ran across the street.
Jock told me when he got closer that the boy was dark-skinned. He was obviously a gypsy. He knew straight away that what was happening and went in there to try and save him.
And then I started shouting in Bulgarian, "Go back, go back." That's when they started attacking me.
More of them started coming towards me, and I realised, shit, now I'm in some trouble here. So I reached into my right pocket and I pulled out the knife, opened it with two hands, and held it up in the air for everybody to see.
When I took out the knife, I thought that they would be scared into leaving me alone.
As I understand it, they all end up moving away from the boy on the ground. And then things started to get a bit serious for Jock.
I was constantly turning in a circle, and every time one would come to me, I would lunge at them with the knife in a swiping movement to scare them.
They picked up bits of pavement, they were throwing that at Jock.
Rocks were aimed at my head and I was blocking them.
He was knocked to the ground. He at that stage got very concerned about his own safety. He thought if he didn't get up, he thought he was fighting for his survival.
The next thing I remember, I'm on the ground and the police are there.
Jock was charged with a very high-level murder charge, which was called murder by hooliganism or with hooliganism. And what they mean by that, which has taken us a little while to understand, is that it was an unprovoked attack. That Jock apparently went out there with a knife wanting to kill people that night, wanting to kill Bulgarians specifically.
Все пак не става въпрос за един пострадал, доколкото съм наясно с фактическата обстановка, но зависи какво ще прецени и съда, би могъл да пострада и друг от групата на Андрей Монов и на Антуан Захариев. Но по едно щастливо стечение на обстоятелствата това не се е случило.
It became clear that alcohol was a factor at play on the night. Jock himself had had a few drinks and had a blood alcohol concentration of 0.1. But in contrast to that, the boys in the group appeared to be much more heavily affected. The boy who was injured had a blood alcohol concentration of 0.18. And amazingly, the boy who died, Monov, had a blood alcohol concentration of 0.29.
All I remember is being hit on the head and falling down. I don't remember who or by what, and I don't remember anything of what happened after that.
No, still, I don't remember killing Andrei Monov.
See you later, matey. I think when Jock first told me his story, it seemed a bit confused and a bit jumbled up. Okay, mate, see you tomorrow. There is the bit that I had to say, well, how could that be? And that's the bit where he does not remember the knife causing the wounds.
Domino
My father said to me one time, it was very difficult for me to start helping you. I didn't want my father to defend me because I was his son. I wanted him to defend me because he believed in me that my story and that what I did was right.
Not that I specifically doubted him, but you always, and maybe this is the pathologist in me, you always like to have verifying and corroborating evidence. I thought, could there be another side to this story?
Hello, how's Jock? We wanted to understand the full version of events of what had happened that night, not just what Jock said, because of course everybody sees things slightly differently.
There's a family there that has lost their only child, and that is a tragic outcome.
When you're in prison, you don't want to be seen as being weak or emotional or things like this. So it's actually hard for me to say. I'm trying to build up strength now as we speak to say it. I'd lie on the bed and my heart would beat and it would echo back into the pillow. And I would just think about Andrei Monov's heart stopping and trying to pump. It's just very difficult for me to but you get the picture. And so now I can't sleep on my stomach, I have to sleep on my back.
The point is, in fact, I felt the same way because I felt with the Monovs, I felt, I've still got you, even though...
Debatably.
Well, I can still come here and see you.
Yeah, I know.
Сега останалите новини от деня. Повече от 200 души дойдоха на погребението на 20-годишният Андрей Монов, синът на известния психолог Христо Монов.
Everybody liked him. He was very outgoing. He was a very nice person. And something you may not know is that he was a very peaceful person. He did not fight. He did not argue.
At the funeral of Andrei Monov, a lot of members of the establishment of the then Bulgarian government, as well as of the judiciary, participated. The Minister of Interior was there. The head of the police was there.
Живот. Аз съм убеден, че убийца на моя син е социопат. Той не признава ценностите на нашето общество. Той си има...
The father of the dead boy was a graduate in psychology from Sofia University. We actually studied together.
No, I don't...
Then he became deputy chairperson of the State Agency of Child Protection in Bulgaria. You have to be politically well-connected and personally also well-connected to get this job.
That does raise a question in my mind as to, is Jock going to be treated any differently because of this?
Bulgaria is newly joined to the European Union. It's a country with newfound freedoms where people like Simon are rightfully demanding the highest standards in judicial process. But students of history will know that the courts belonging to the communist tradition approach cases in an entirely different way. There's clearly a clash of the old with the new and what can be acceptable. Simon was struggling with the legal issues. Through a friend in Sydney, I was asked if I could help. Simon was given my number, he rang me, we discussed the case and organised a small team. Our role is limited. Simon already had employed a Bulgarian lawyer for his son.
Oh, goodness gracious, that's me.
Quite out of the blue, there was this report about an accusation that Jock had been involved in a knife incident in Chatswood some years before.
And that was all there is, just that bit there?
No charges were ever laid. The police conducted an investigation. There's nothing to say Jock has done anything wrong. However, the article exists and it colours the case because people who want to hurt Jock's position or say that he's dangerous or whatever use the article whenever they can.
Interpol checks were done on Jock, and it was found that he didn't have any criminal convictions or any pending charges in any of the countries that he's been in, including Australia.
We ended up having multiple trips to Bulgaria, and in the March following the events, finally we obtained the file with all the evidence for the trial, all the witness statements.
There was already a fight between my friends and some other people. I think they were gypsies, but I'm not sure.
It was clear that a large number of them were taken from the boys in the group, and that those boys had identified early on in the piece that they'd interacted and had a fight with Roma people at the scene.
There was an argument between Andre and some gypsies.
There was some kind of commotion. You could hear screams.
The most exciting time for me was when I got the translation of one of the independent witnesses, Victor Georgiev. As his police statement unfolded, I realised it was actually Jock's story.
The hitting lasted for about 30-40 seconds. It was chaotic, random as far as I could see. The hits were very strong, violent.
I'm thinking, well, why haven't the police taken this up? I mean, this is Jock's story. Why are they saying that there's no proof of anything that Jock said was true?
I saw one of the boys from the group come behind the boy with the knife and throwing some kind of object on him. That, as far as I could see, hit him on the head. Then the boy with the knife fell onto the ground. For a moment, he propped himself on one arm, and after that he stood up again.
It's actually quite harrowing. One man with 15 people.
А дори да е имало някакъв инцидент, какъвто всъщност не се извежда от доказателствата по делото, аз не считам, че това поведение на подсъдимия Пол Фриман е мирно разрешаване на проблема.
In her summary that went with the indictment, the prosecutor has actually stated that Jock actually sought out victims to stab lethally. And I think what I find so objectionable to that is it just flies totally in the evidence that her own experts have given her. 2 court-appointed psychiatrists and a psychologist. Basically, their psychological profile of Jock is of a young man that has a strong sense of social justice, is not overly aggressive, and is able to cope with stressful situations without losing control.
Actually, most of the snow's come off the trees.
I do know he's a very impulsive boy. He was always the fixer, the person who came and helped.
I just wish that he had never picked up that knife. I would think it was just one of those spur-of-the-moment decisions that, he will, and we will all forever live to regret.
Jock pleaded not guilty to the charge of murder with hooliganism. If the case had happened in Australia, central to his defence would have been the claim that he was acting in self-defence.
My friend was stabbed in the heart. You don't stab a person in the heart for self-defence.
If Jock was on trial in Australia with the same evidence, the same witnesses, then I think it is most likely that he would either be acquitted completely of murder on the basis of self-defence or defence of another, or at the very least, a verdict of manslaughter due to excessive self-defence.
There are several peculiarities of the Bulgarian legal system, and one of these is that close family members are allowed to apply and be accepted as part of the defence team. And it was, to my amazement, I suddenly found myself turned from father and friend to a quasi-lawyer.
I love my father very much and respect him for who he is, even though we're so different.
It was called to decide whose interest it takes into consideration. A family which was well connected, or somebody who came from the other part of the world and came to help a member of an ethnic minority that is almost universally hated by society.
The Bulgarian system is inquisitorial, so they don't have juries, they have a bench of judges. Simon and Jock are at the bar table together, one after another, cross-examining some of the important witnesses.
It was extremely traumatic having the parents of the boy who died as the first two witnesses. I did doubt myself as to whether or not, in fact, I was doing the right thing for Jock.
It is hard to talk about my only child. He made our life meaningful at all.
He had many various circles of friends, which, I should say, belonged to the real elite of the Bulgarian youth. They went together to football matches, but neither he nor any of his friends behaved badly. At home, my son didn't drink.
The civil claimants, the parents of the dead boy, and then also the injured boy himself, were suing for compensation. And this actually ran at the same time as the criminal proceedings and had very significant impact on the trial and how it was run. One after the other of the members of the group changed their version of events to now say that there were no Roma people there and there was no fight with them. The defence wanted to then bring in the original statements of the group members to the police, but importantly, the parents of the dead boy worked with the prosecutor to block the defence attempts.
That's a remarkable situation from our point of view, and in fact in 2010 the law changed to stop that being allowed to happen.
It's a fair burden on Bulgarian constitution to force me.
It will be a disgrace for the family if the public realizes that the son was drunk and was a member of a gang that attacked an innocent Roma in the middle of Sofia.
The time that I really noticed it and started to get very, very angry was when we were cross-examining some of the policemen. And we knew that these three policemen had already said in their signed statements that Jock had gone to the aid of a Roma, been beaten by the gang. In court, they actually denied what they had actually written in their signed statements. And of course, I was just amazed. We knew they'd changed their story. The Monos knew they'd changed the story. When we asked the judge to adjudicate, the Monos used their right to say, we're not going to have their police statements read out in court. Therefore, the policeman got away with it. How can we win? We have someone controlling the evidence, civil claimants who are asking for $500,000 in compensation.
I'd like to say the things that everybody knows, corruption, discrimination, racism, backwardness. My dad, Simon, he sits me down, no, we can't do this, we might put the court offside, da-da-da-da-da. I'll see you in March. Yeah, what comes? When is it? March 25th or 26th?
And all this time, I'm trying to show Jock that there is hope. We've got to go with the system. This is our big hope, that the system won't fail you.
I'll see you in March.
Be good. Don't do anything I wouldn't.
See, all my life I've believed in the system. And I think in Australia, I think you more or less can do that. And here I'm for the first time faced with a system that I don't have confidence in.
The case in Bulgaria doesn't run from beginning to end in 1 or 2 weeks. It has a day here and a day there. Sometimes those days are weeks or months apart. Sometimes he flies to Bulgaria so that a witness can give evidence and the witness doesn't turn up. Sometimes he flies to Bulgaria for the next stage in the process, but one of the judges is suddenly unavailable. No matter how many times he goes, he still has to earn a living, and he has to turn around, get back to his home in Newcastle and get back to work.
Obviously, I can't keep up this level of focus forever. I will actually run out of financial resources.
I think every trip it just gets harder and harder, and he's become more and more anxious.
On the last day of the trial, the forensic pathologist gave evidence about the autopsy of Monov. He gave evidence that the wound showed that there was a fast thrusting motion. However, he conceded under questioning that he couldn't actually tell whether that thrusting came from the person holding the knife or from Monov actually falling or pushing towards the knife. The knife wound itself showed the possibility that there was a double-edged blade. Jock's knife was not a double-edged blade, and straight away this raised significant questions for Jock's barrister in Bulgaria about whether there was another knife involved.
We don't know how this is affecting the judge or the panel. We don't know whether we're going to get true justice from this system until we get the verdict.
In December 2009, we'd been through some 18 months of court hearings. It was Judgment Day, and it was a very simple statement: murder with hooliganism. And the sentence was 20 years.
When my father grabbed my shoulder, I didn't want him to do that because I didn't need it and I didn't want other people to think I did. And I shrugged him off and I said, I don't need support, I don't need that. And my father said something to me which actually did ring home. It's not for you, it's for me.
I think part of my world fell in, and my faith in the Bulgarian justice system just took a huge nosedive. As far as I'm concerned, my son, Jock, is a courageous human being who did what very few of us would do in this community, which was to go to the aid of someone. And what it led to was, unfortunately, a significant tragedy.
Баща му заяви, че се гордее с него. Според мен в нравствен план той от тук нататък може да бъде заклеймен единствено и само като баща на убит, защото аз съм убеден, че сина му е продукт на семейството, в което е живял.
It wasn't just that he was my son. It wasn't just that he was Jock and I was his father and I had to protect him no matter what happened. He was a great injustice being done to a young man by a system that didn't seem to care. Didn't even seem to care that everybody realised that it didn't seem to care.
I had nothing against him. Why would I ever want to kill him? I don't even know if it was from me. The courts don't even know if it was from me.
There are no partial fingerprints from Jock on the handle of that butterfly knife. I think that's really strange.
When I examine Jock Palfreeman, I want to underline that on his hands, over his clothes, no blood stains.
That means it's still possible that it wasn't Jock that was holding the knife at the time Monov got stabbed.
I'm not sure that he is a murderer.
If I had a son and a daughter, I would not let them go to Bulgaria. If they got involved in something, you wouldn't know that they wouldn't be fitted up for a crime they didn't commit.
I'm worried that Simon will have a stroke or that there'll be some other catastrophic event that will take Simon away forever.
Hello, I'm Caroline Jones. Tonight we conclude the story of Dr Simon Palfreeman on a mission to help his son, who's serving 20 years in jail in Bulgaria. Young Jock Palfreeman was convicted of unprovoked murder after a melee in which one boy was fatally stabbed and another boy injured. Australian story producer Belinda Hawkins has been following this case from the outset and is researching a book on the subject. Tonight, all hopes focus on an appeal hearing, as Simon Palfreeman is pushed to new limits. First, this recap.
The court was called to decide whose interest it takes into consideration. A family which was well connected, or somebody who came from the other part of the world and came to help a member of an ethnic minority that is almost universally hated by the society.
I just let Jock talk, and he told me his story.
As I understand it, they went out for a night on the town. They could hear some noise coming from the subway.
A group of football fans started walking up the street. People were walking past them and they were pushing them, and I saw two men on the ground being beaten.
Jock told me when he got closer that the boy was dark-skinned. He was obviously a gypsy.
And then I started shouting in Bulgarian, "Go back, go back." That's when they started attacking me. More of them started coming towards me, and I realized, shit, now I'm in some trouble here. So I reached into my right pocket and I pulled out the knife. I thought they would be scared.
They all end up moving away from the boy on the ground. And then things started to get a bit serious for Jock. He was knocked to the ground. He got, at that stage, got very concerned about his own safety. He thought if he didn't get up, if he thought he was fighting for his survival.
Jock Palfreeman says he only used a knife as self-defence.
Two locals were stabbed. One, a student named Andrei Monov, died on the
Amazingly, Monov had a blood alcohol concentration of 0.29. Jock himself had 0.1.
Murder with hooliganism was the verdict, and the sentence was 20 years.
I think part of my world fell in, and my faith in the Bulgarian justice system just took a huge nosedive. Being a pathologist is very much science-based and has very little to do with the art of being a lawyer. I found the whole episode of going to Bulgaria and joining in Jock's defence team very, very difficult. It was a very, very different world.
Here we go again.
We knew the next procedural thing was an appeal, but mentally we couldn't prepare for anything until we knew how the court had come up with the verdict of murder with hooliganism.
Yeah, well, all these documents ring a bell.
My father has a very high moral standard. He's very principled. I guess his faith that people will do the right thing clouded his understanding of the situation, that this is not a place where you can just believe that people will do the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing. It's not what happens here. There's nothing my father can do, and this is what would infuriate him.
In many quiet moments throughout the day, and particularly on first getting up, the first thing that I just find overwhelming is this: what is happening in Bulgaria? What's happening to Jock? Where is he now? Is he all right?
Not having been there that night, nobody knows exactly what happened, and there is doubt. I know that Jock thinks about this.
Still, I don't remember killing Andrei Monov. I had nothing against him. Why would I ever want to kill him? I don't even know if it was from me. The courts don't even know if it was from me.
The judge found that Jock had intent to murder because he used a butterfly knife, and because of the strength of the stab wounds, and because of where the stab wounds were on the bodies. However, none of these things are actually inconsistent with Jock having attempted to defend himself.
What was confusing is that on the one hand, the court set out and seemed to accept the evidence of the independent witness Georgiev, namely that there was a cruel beating of a man for 30 to 40 seconds, and yet then in its conclusion, it positively found that there was no evidence of any fight or belting of the gypsy or the Roma. As a matter of logic and legal reasoning, We find that inexplicable.
When I first started reading the witness statements, it was clear that a large number of them were taken from the boys in the group, and that those boys had identified early on in the piece that they'd interacted and had a fight with Roma people at the scene.
There was an argument between Andre and some gypsies.
There was some kind of commotion. You could hear screams.
The police who were first on the scene also indicated that they'd been told that Jock had gone over there because of an altercation between the group and Roma. These people actually then changed their stories at the trial, and when defence tried to get their first statements brought into evidence, this was blocked by the parents of the dead boy and the injured boy who worked along with the prosecutor.
There are something in excess of 200 cases already from Bulgaria in the waiting list at the European Court of Human Rights. Its judiciary is clearly under scrutiny from the European Union, and Simon's in the middle of that.
Действително, нашата правна система е различна в известна степен от вашата правна система и от останалите европейски държави, но в крайна сметка никой няма право да отнема човешки живот.
Simon comes from a large family of 7. Simon was the oldest, and as such his role was really, a lot of the time, was to help look after the younger children.
I think ever since, all of this has kind of happened with Jock, we often think, well, it can't get much worse than that. When I had the diagnosis that I had myelodysplasia, when I had this diagnosis, there was kind of a sense of, I think it just did get worse. I think that just happened. If I didn't find a bone marrow transplant match, I had a very high risk of death.
We were all tested by the Red Cross here Easter of 2010. Would you believe it, of the 6 siblings, I was the only match to be a donor for the transplant.
On one level, it was like, not more for Simon. But also, it was a question of we need to do this as quickly as possible and this needs to be a priority.
And so in the middle of 2010, Helen and I went across back to the UK. It's been one of the highlights, in fact, of the 3 years, that it's been one of the most successful things that we've managed to do, as opposed to the lack of success with Jock.
In October 2010, the first day of the appeal court came around, and we knew we were getting back into that series of multiple trips to Bulgaria.
I think we're here for lots of different reasons. Some is because we're family, and others because he has been such a loyal and good friend to a lot of people.
If you ask me what I wanted out of this whole lengthy process, I would have liked to have seen the truth of the events come out.
1 minute here on this, sunny October day, Sydney Harbour, and tomorrow, on Tuesday, I'll be in Sofia, and on Thursday in the Sofia court. So it's a pretty big change. At the moment I am tired and nervous. So many times I come away from the court thinking this is fantastic, we've got all the evidence that supports Jock's case. The court cannot but find him not guilty. And then to have the disappointment of such a flawed result last December. So I'm very cautious now about letting myself be too optimistic. However, I am aware that this is a different court, and really it's Jock's best chance at getting some real justice.
I don't dream anymore. I don't have any hopes for the future. You can't have hope without having options.
The court have to be satisfied to an equivalent standard of beyond reasonable doubt that Jock has committed murder with hooliganism motives and that there was no provocation and no self-defence or defence of another before they can find him guilty. The defence wanted to look at whether or not the injuries were actually consistent with the knife that Jock had brought.
The way the forensic evidence was treated in the first trial was so badly done. When I heard that the appeal courts had rejected our request for reviewing the forensic evidence, they left me feeling with a very, very deep pit in the bottom of my stomach that things were not going to go right.
I can't sleep well if I support court or police to put some innocent to stay in jail.
Dr Grozova is a medical doctor but conducts forensic medical examinations. So, for instance, she examined Jock and also the boy who was wounded.
When I examine Jock Palfreeman, I want to underline that on his hands, over his clothes, no blood stains.
During the first trial, she was prepared to accept that there were alternative versions to those put forward by the prosecutor.
I'm not sure that he is a murderer. When I have this knife, I saw that it's one-edged knife. When one-edged weapon is used, only one part of rib can be cut. Here we have two neighboring ribs cut, one over another. It's impossible to think that this knife can make this defects on the ribs.
Was it even Jock's knife that caused the wounds?
Изведнъж се оказа, може би, най-близо до мене беше, може би. И аз първи момент си мислех, че по някакъв начин може да го спра.
Това е момента, в който той те намъшква.
Най-вероятно тогава ме намъшкал, да.
There's clearly seems to be real doubt about what happened. And of course, in a criminal trial, when you have to prove an intent to kill, a specific intent to kill, which is what is needed here, that doubt becomes incredibly important.
I'm not so sure that after a short time I will go on to work with this police. They work not clean. My colleagues doesn't use possibilities of forensic science. They are not well educated, and that makes a very big stress over my decision to be in near future forensic expert. And one of these cases is the case of Jock Palfreeman.
It became quite clear to me why, in fact, Jock had a knife that day. First of all, carrying a knife is not illegal in Bulgaria. Secondly, many youths carry knives around. Jock actually had been set upon on a number of occasions by groups of thugs.
He did tell a story in that time that he was living in Bulgaria about how he saw a gypsy called Simo assaulted by a group of Bulgarians and how he intervened.
It was in a rock festival. Skinheads, they came to me and beat me and bumped me with knife. What Jock did was very like save my life, because he was like, okay, we gotta get out of here. I didn't saw Jock with knife, or he was not that kind of person like, oh, let's go and beat them, or I have knife, and he didn't say that.
If someone's been beset by somebody else, if he sees an injustice, he doesn't look at the consequences. He just runs in there and tries to fix it up in the way he thinks it should be fixed up. Now, that's not always the right way, but that is his motivation.
I'm extremely nervous at the moment. It's great to see Jock in there, and he's usually a source of some strength because he usually takes it pretty well.
Even though the appeal court refused to hear further evidence about the forensics, it did allow evidence to be called on what we considered one of the most central aspects of the case. Why did Jock go over to the group in the first place, and why did he actually pull out the knife?
Several of the gang were questioned and essentially admitted that there was a fight on the Roma or the Gypsy, an attack on the Roma or the Gypsy. Now that's contrary to the finding of the court below. So that's critical evidence.
The policemen agreed that their original police statements, in fact, were valid and true and were a better representation than what they had said during the court. No more was ever said about that, even though it's obvious perjury, but no more was said about that. But at least we had their original police statements now.
It's a small country. Everybody knows everybody else. And when the foreigner is a defendant, it is not difficult to exercise such an influence.
В принцип никога не съм искал пред медиите да ги говоря тия неща, просто винаги всичко е ставало през родителите на Андрей. Ако те ме помогнат, нали, тогава ще дам изявление, както и стана.
They change the rules every time. I've already got one.
No. It's not that it can't come in. It's just that there's somebody special's got to...
No. They just change the rules all the time.
No. Jock.
Simon looked very optimistic, whereas Jock looked very pessimistic, because Jock had seen more of the Bulgarian society than his father.
I said I'll be ready in the morning to go to court if the judge turns up.
As a joke, and then...
Yeah, as a joke, and he didn't turn up.
Sometimes his perspective on things is becoming much more focused on what's happening to him on a day-to-day basis. He still gets very concerned about other inmates and their problems, and he wants to fight any number of battles on their behalf. And it's always hard to get him back and focused on the important issue, for me anyway, which is to get him out of there.
The big freeze gripping Europe has disrupted travel around the world.
My father is stuck. The Heathrow airport, snow out, has closed the airport down, and I don't know exactly where he is at the moment. Somewhere between Sydney and Sofia. I'm following it on the news.
Where is Simon Palfreeman now?
As far as I know, his flight was redirected to Thessaloniki because of dense fog over the Sofia airport.
I'm just pretty well overwhelmed with, the last 4 days. Just to get here and to be so close on several occasions to actually being present here, and the lengths that we had to take to actually try and be here, and then we just miss out by literally a couple of hours. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, I have to say.
He was even more disappointed when he found out that they'd postponed the court date so that, in fact, Simon could give his final statement, but they'd postponed it not to the next day as Simon had hoped, but it was in fact postponed to yet another date in January.
I love my father a lot. He's very, very, very dedicated. He won't stop. He's not so much a storm. He's more of a river, slowly wearing down the cliff. And that's what I really admire about him.
Whereas before, what I would have considered to be some of his traits as being just annoying or difficult, I now see as a very, very solid inner conviction of how the world should run and his sense of justice.
Actually, a good day overall to today. I had a very fruitful meeting with the European Commission, which has put me on a bit of a high because they've obviously been very interested in the case.
Step away, step away.
We would like to make sure that these proceedings are fair, that all the evidence is brought to the court, and that the court is impartial. I fear of undue influence on the court.
I have not seen such unprecedented pressure on the Bulgarian court in any other case. I believe even now, in the courtroom, is the chairman of the Helsinki Committee, my classmate from the Faculty of Philosophy, Krasimir Kanev, who doesn't dare to look me in the eye. The question is, can the murderer be corrected? Accept my definite opinion. He cannot. So now I understand the efforts of this father to defend him because he is a product of the family in which he grew up. A family which does not respect the highest human values.
I would like to sit down with the Monod family and discuss with them and try to make them see my point of view, but I don't think it would work. I think that's what they've shown in the last 3 years, is that they are incapable of looking at the objective evidence.
I was a bit surprised yesterday. He had his beard on, he's always been very clean shaven. He certainly looked a little wilder than usual. And I think for him it was a sign that this was the last day. And yet we've still got this terrible verdict hanging over our heads. We just don't know where it's going to go. It could be great news, it could be terrible news. And until we get that, I don't think I'll be sleeping very well.
Аз не искам друго. Да го обесят на площад Света Неделя, където уби сина ми, това няма да върне сина ми. Но когато този човек е в затвора и когато аз крайната инстанция завинаги го оставя в затвора, тогава поне ще съм сигурен, че той няма да убие друг, няма да почерни и друго семейството.
After the appeal process had finished in court, but we were waiting for their verdict, I went through lots of periods of self-doubt. Why didn't I mention this? Why didn't I mention that? I'd look at the English version of the Bulgarian news to see if there was anything that would give me a hint as to which way they're likely to go.
A couple of weeks after he returned from Bulgaria, Simon had a health scare. He woke up one morning, very early in the morning, and he couldn't see out of his eye, out of one eye. He dismissed that and thought, oh, look, it's early in the morning, and often it's difficult to see out of your eyes early in the morning. But as the morning progressed and his sight in that eye worsened, he took himself off to casualty and has subsequently discovered that he's partially lost the sight in his right eye.
It's another part of this tragedy. I think it's obvious that it's a direct result of the stress from the case and from me being here in prison.
Simon appears to us to be losing hope in the system and appears to be disintegrating in terms of his ability to cope with what he sees his son going through.
I'm worried that Simon will have a stroke or that there'll be some other catastrophic event that will take Simon away forever.
It was a Monday night and the phone rang and it was a reporter from England saying, how did I feel? I said, about what? Sort of back of my mind knowing what, but not knowing what because I hadn't heard anything. And he said, oh, well, the court's just upheld the 20 years and the verdict of the first court. And I was just absolutely astounded.
It was a shock reading the reasons for the appeal court's decision, primarily because they had accepted the inconsistencies in what the group had said, but had now actually formulated a worse version of what Jock had done, saying that he was potentially trying to kill many more people than had originally been led at trial.
Political influence over the court, the prosecution, over the police is very strong. And I think that's the disaster in Bulgaria.
The Monoffs have certainly lost their son, and there's no doubt about that. It's been very hard. But 20 years, I feel as though I've lost a son as well.
The prison where Jock is, Sofia prison, is one of the worst prisons in Bulgaria and maybe also in Europe.
There's lots of things that need to be improved here, and I think that's a good way to spend my time, is trying to improve the living standards of prisoners in here.
It's a kind of a living death. It's an inhuman condition of detention, essentially.
I have no hope, but what choice do I have? It's a rock and a hard place, and I've decided to try and make the best of it whilst continuing to fight the justice system. That's the way it is.
I think the ability of anybody to survive that long term, and the ability of people to actually cause violence in these prisons is so high that I am very, very fearful that, in fact, we might not even get to the end of this process, that, in fact, we might actually find that he's met some serious either violence or possibly even death. In those early mornings, I sometimes imagine what it must be like to be flying into Sofia for the last time, to identify Jock and to take his body home rather than to take him home.